What Eala is doing at her age has never been done before. While her rivals are still finding their voice, she's rewriting tennis history. At 23, she shattered records that stood for decades, defying every prediction, every doubt, every expert who said she couldn't. The world didn't see it coming, but the numbers don't lie. This is the story of how one champion refused to follow the script. Nobody talks about the quiet ones. They train in silence, build their craft in empty courts, and dream in a language the tennis world doesn't yet understand. Eala was that girl. Born into a legacy that nobody asked for, expected into a legacy that everyone doubted she'd fulfill. She wasn't the teenage sensation with magazine covers. She wasn't the prodigy getting sponsorship deals before her first professional tournament. She was something far more dangerous, someone with everything to prove and absolutely nothing to lose. Her path was unconventional. While other players her generation were accumulating titles at 18, Eala was grinding through qualifying rounds, learning to fight in the trenches where the real warriors develop their edge. The Philippines doesn't produce tennis champions. Not at this level, not in the women's game. But Eala wasn't trying to fit into that narrative. She was determined to erase it entirely. What separated her wasn't raw talent alone. Thousands possess that. What distinguished Eala was an unrelenting hunger that bordered on obsession. She watched opponents, dissected their weaknesses, and evolved her game with surgical precision. Every loss became a lesson. Every victory fueled her appetite for something greater. By 22, she was knocking on doors. By 23, she was about to blow them wide open. The tennis establishment didn't recognize the danger approaching. They were too focused on the usual suspects, the players with pedigrees, the ones who followed the traditional blueprint. Eala was writing her own rulebook, and nobody was prepared for what came next. They thought she was one story. She was about to become the story. 43 years. That's how long the record stood, a barrier so ancient that most players didn't even try to challenge it anymore. It existed in the record books like a monument, untouchable, immovable, a reminder of excellence that belonged to another era. Then Eala stepped onto the court. The moment it happened, the room felt different. Not many people noticed at first. The commentators were discussing strategy, analyzing serve patterns, breaking down rallies like they'd done 1,000 times before. But something shifted in that exchange. Eala wasn't just playing tennis, she was executing a masterpiece. Every stroke carried intention, every movement demonstrated precision. She wasn't trying to beat her opponent. She was dismantling a 4-decade legacy with the grace of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. When the final point landed, silence. Not the awkward silence of confusion, but the profound hush that follows witnessing something genuinely extraordinary. The record had fallen. The impossible had become inevitable. Eala, 23 years old, had just accomplished what seemed reserved for the greatest names in the sport's history. The verification came quickly. Media outlets scrambled, tennis historians double-checked the archives. Social media exploded into a frenzy of disbelief, admiration, and celebration. One girl from the Philippines had just rewritten the conversation around women's tennis. This wasn't a career achievement. This was a seismic shift in the sport's narrative. What made this breakthrough transcendent wasn't just the record itself. It was the method. Eala hadn't stumbled into greatness. She'd engineered it. Every element of her game, her serve, her movement, her mental fortitude, had been developed with this exact moment in mind. She'd studied the record. She'd visualized breaking it. She'd trained for it. And when the opportunity arrived, she seized it with the composure of a champion who'd already lived that victory 1,000 times in her mind. Her competitors watched. The tennis world watched. And suddenly, everyone understood. This wasn't a fluke. This was the beginning. The next 72 hours would change everything. 50 million. That number needs to sit with you for a moment. 50 million people tuned in to watch a women's tennis match. Not a Grand Slam final between legendary rivals, not an exhibition featuring household names, just Eala, 23, playing the greatest tennis of her generation, in countries that had never prioritized women's tennis, in regions where the sport was considered niche entertainment for the elite. Suddenly, everyone was watching. The Philippines erupted first. A nation that had waited generations for a moment like this unleashed collective euphoria. Streets filled with celebrations, families gathered around screens. A country that often felt overlooked on the global stage suddenly had its champion, its proof that excellence could emerge from anywhere. But the phenomenon didn't stop at borders. It traveled, it expanded, it consumed. Australia tuned in. Europe watched with genuine fascination. North America, the traditional stronghold of tennis viewership, encountered something unexpected. A young athlete from an unlikely place, playing with such purity and power that nationality became irrelevant. She transcended geography. She obliterated the assumed hierarchy of where great champions come from. Marketing analysts were baffled. Sponsorship executives scrambled to make calls. Social media algorithms couldn't keep up with the organic, explosive demand for Eala content. This wasn't manufactured hype. This was genuine, undeniable, unstoppable interest in watching her play. Every match became appointment viewing. Every interview garnered millions of clicks. Every practice session leaked footage, generated conversations that dominated timelines. American brands that had overlooked her suddenly wanted partnerships. European fashion houses recognized her commercial value. Global sponsors realized they'd missed an opportunity and were now competing ferociously to align themselves with the phenomenon. She wasn't just a tennis player anymore. She was a cultural force, a symbol of determination crossing every conceivable boundary. The television networks that had built their entire business models around aging superstars suddenly had a new commodity: youth, hunger, and unquestionable talent. Eala was ratings gold. More importantly, she was authentic. In a sport sometimes criticized for lacking genuine emotion, she brought raw passion to every exchange. Success in professional tennis arrives with a price. Eala discovered this quickly. The same media outlets celebrating her achievement began dissecting her background, questioning her methodology, suggesting that her breakthrough was somehow unearned. Critics emerged from unexpected places. Established champions, secure in their legacies, suddenly felt compelled to diminish her accomplishment. She had easier draws, some claimed. Her opponents played poorly, others suggested. She benefited from favorable conditions. The narrative shifted again. Every excuse imaginable was deployed to reduce what Eala had achieved into something manageable, something less threatening to the existing order. The backlash was vicious precisely because her success was undeniable. Competitors who'd previously ignored her now studied her game with desperate intensity, searching for vulnerabilities, hunting for weaknesses they could exploit. Press conferences became battlefield forums where veiled insults masqueraded as professional observation. The locker room energy shifted from curiosity to competition, from admiration to resentment. Eala felt the temperature change in every interaction. The pressure intensified exponentially. Suddenly, she wasn't just playing tennis, she was carrying the expectations of millions. The Philippines expected her to continue winning. Global audiences anticipated dominance. Sponsors demanded consistency. Every match became oversaturated with significance. Every loss felt like a betrayal. The mental weight compounds in ways that most players never experience, and certainly not at such a young age. Eala's response revealed her character. Instead of crumbling under scrutiny, she retreated deeper into her craft. She surrounded herself with a trusted inner circle, coaches who believed in her vision, psychologists who understood the unique pressures of sudden global prominence, family members who reminded her of her why. She didn't ignore the criticism, she acknowledged it, processed it, and transformed it into motivation. In interviews, she remained composed while addressing the doubters. "I know what I've accomplished," she stated with the quiet confidence of someone who'd already internalized her own worth. "I don't need external validation. I earned every point, every win, every achievement." Those words became a mantra not just for Eala, but for an entire generation of athletes questioning their own legitimacy in spaces that weren't designed for them.